I was 6 years old before I learned that mothers were supposed to have faces, not muzzles. Not hollow black eyes set on opposite sides of a long, narrow skull. Not horns that scraped the ceiling whenever they entered a room. Not jaws filled with small, crowded teeth that clicked together when they were pleased. Human mothers did not fold leathery wings around their children when the nights grew cold. They did not announce their return by landing on the roof. And they did not scream when strangers entered the woods. But she was the only mother I knew. For the first 13 years of my life, I lived with her in the Pine Barrens. The cabin had probably belonged to hunters once. There were rusted hooks above the fireplace, narrow bunks built into the walls, and old brass shell casings pressed between the floorboards. One window had been boarded shut. The other was covered with animal hide during winter. Rain came through the roof in 3 places. Tree roots had lifted one corner of the foundation, and the chimney leaned far enough that I expected it to fall whenever the wind grew strong. To me, it was home. Mother could not stand upright inside it. She entered by lowering her head and folding her wings tightly against her back. Her front limbs ended in long black claws, but she could balance on them when necessary, moving with an awkward rhythm that shook dust from the rafters. Her rear legs were shaped like those of a deer, though the joints bent too far and in the wrong direction. Her skin was dark beneath the sparse, wiry hair that covered her neck and shoulders. In summer, her wings smelled like wet bark. In winter, they smelled faintly of smoke. I never knew what she was called. I called her Mother because that was the word written beneath the picture of a woman in one of the books she brought me. It was an old children's dictionary, swollen from rain and missing its cover. Mother had carried it carefully between her teeth and placed it beside my bed. I pointed to the picture. Then I pointed to her. She made a low sound in her throat. I assumed that meant I was right. She brought me everything I knew about the world. Books from abandoned campsites, newspapers sealed inside plastic bags, empty cans with colorful labels, torn coats, tools. Once she returned with a small battery-powered radio. Less than a month. But in that time, I heard music, weather reports, advertisements, and human voices discussing places I could not imagine. Cities, highways, schools, hospitals. I listened until the batteries weakened and every voice stretched into something deep and monstrous. I learned language badly and out of order. Labels first, radio voices second, real conversation only after they found me. Mother hated the radio. Whenever it played, she paced outside the cabin, dragging her claws through the pine needles. After it died, she carried it deep into the forest and never brought it back. She never spoke. Not in words. She communicated through movement and sound. One strike against the roof meant she was returning. 2 meant I could come outside. 3 meant I needed to hide. There was a narrow space beneath the floor where the old hunters had stored supplies. Mother had widened it with her claws. She lined it with blankets, leaves, and strips of insulation torn from somewhere else. When she struck the roof 3 times, I climbed through the loose floorboards and pulled them shut above me. Sometimes I remained there for minutes, sometimes hours. I learned to recognize people by the sounds they made as they passed through the woods. Hunters moved slowly and stopped often. Hikers talked loudly, even when no one else was near. Search parties traveled in groups. They called names into the trees and carried bright lights that swept across the cabin walls. Mother avoided all of them. She would lie flat against the roof with her wings spread over the shingles, so still that she looked like part of the damage. Other times, she disappeared into the trees and began screaming from somewhere far away. The sound was impossible to ignore. It started like a woman in pain, rose into something like tearing metal, then ended with a deep coughing noise that I felt inside my chest. Strangers always moved toward it or away from it. Either response drew them away from me. I believed Mother was protecting me because people were dangerous. She had given me reasons to believe that. When I was 7, a hunter found the cabin. Mother had been gone since morning. I was outside collecting branches when I heard boots moving through the brush. I froze. The man stepped into the clearing with a rifle over one shoulder. He wore an orange vest and had gray hair beneath his cap. When he saw me, he lowered the rifle. He spoke gently. I understood some of his words, but not enough to answer properly. I knew he wanted me to come closer. He offered me water and something wrapped in silver paper. I had never eaten chocolate before. I remember its smell. Sweet, warm from his pocket. I took one step toward him. The trees behind the cabin exploded. Mother struck him from the side. Her wings opened as she hit him, filling the clearing with leaves and dirt. The man fired once into the air. Mother threw him against a tree and stood over him, screaming with her muzzle inches from his face. I thought she would kill him. Instead, she looked at me. Then she looked toward the cabin. 3 times, one claw struck the ground. I ran inside and crawled beneath the floor. I heard the man's rifle fire again. I heard branches breaking. And nothing. Mother returned after dark. Blood ran from a wound along her shoulder, but I couldn't find a bullet. She stood in the doorway and waited until I crawled out. There was blood around her mouth, too. She lowered her head. I pressed my forehead against hers. She made the clicking sound that meant she was pleased. For years, I believed she had killed that man. When the police eventually found me, I learned he had survived. He was the first person to report seeing me. He told authorities that he had discovered a pale, barefoot child living alone in a ruined cabin. Before he could approach, a winged animal had attacked him. They searched for 3 days. They found his rifle, his blood, and pieces of his clothing. They did not find the cabin. Mother moved me before sunset. We walked for most of the night. She carried the blankets and books in her mouth while I followed behind her. When I became tired, she lowered herself so I could climb onto her back. We settled in a second cabin, smaller and older than the first. That was where I began hearing the others. At first, I assumed the distant screams belonged to Mother. Then one night, she was standing beside me when the cry came through the trees. Her entire body stiffened. A second call answered from farther north. Then another from somewhere behind the cabin. Mother knocked me down and spread her wings over me. Her heart struck against her ribs hard enough that I could feel it through her chest. She was afraid. Until that moment, I had not known she could be. The cries moved around us throughout the night. Some were high and sharp, others were deeper than Mother's voice. Branches snapped beneath heavy bodies. Wings passed over the cabin, briefly blocking the moonlight. Mother remained over me until morning. After that, our rules changed. She rubbed mud and crushed cedar needles over my skin every evening. She burned my hair after cutting it. She buried anything stained with my blood. Whenever we moved between cabins, we crossed streams and doubled back several times. Mother was no longer hiding me, only from people. There were things in the Pine Barrens that frightened her. Things that sounded like her. I started seeing them in fragments. A dark shape crouched beside a distant fire tower. 2 red eyes between the trees. A wing passing over the moon, much larger than Mother's. Once, I found tracks around the cabin. The prints began like hooves, but each ended with 3 narrow marks pressed deep into the soil. Mother found me studying them. She drove her claws through the prints until nothing remained. That night, she did not leave to hunt. She sat beside the door and watched the trees. As I grew older, the differences between us became harder to ignore. Mother could lift a deer from the ground. I struggled to drag firewood. She could see without light. I could not. She heard vehicles before they reached the dirt roads miles away. She smelled people through rain. I was human. At least, I believed I was. But there were things I could do that the people who found me later said were unusual. I could hear high sounds beyond the range of most adults. I could move through dry brush without making noise. My pupils widened until my eyes appeared almost black in darkness. Wounds healed quickly. Illness passed within hours. I assumed Mother had taught me well. I never considered that some of it might have been inherited. When I was 12, she began preparing the cabin as though we were expecting a storm. She reinforced the doors with timber. She covered the windows. She carried stones from the river and arranged them in a circle around the building. Most importantly, she began digging. There was already a shallow storage space under the cabin. Mother tore through its floor and continued into the earth beneath it. For weeks, she worked at night. She created a tunnel barely wide enough for me to crawl through. It ran beyond the cabin and emerged beneath the roots of a fallen pine. She forced me to practice using it. Again and again. 3 strikes. Lift the boards. Crawl into the darkness. Do not stop. Do not turn around. Do not come back until daylight. I did not understand what she expected to happen. Then, a few weeks after my 13th birthday, the woods went silent. There were no insects. No owls. No frogs calling from the wetlands. Even the wind seemed to avoid the trees. Mother stood in the clearing with her head raised. The sparse hair along her spine lifted. From somewhere to the east, a single scream crossed the barrens. Another answered. Then another. There were so many that the calls overlapped. Mother ran inside. She struck the floor 3 times. I did not move. I was 13. I had spent my entire life hiding whenever I was told. I was tired of being afraid of things I had never clearly seen. Mother hit the floor again. I shook my head. The sound she made was not one I had heard before. It was small. Almost a whine. Then something landed on the roof. The cabin groaned beneath its weight. Dust fell around us. Mother seized my shirt in her teeth and threw me toward the loose boards. Claws scraped across the shingles. A muzzle pushed through the chimney opening, scattering stones into the fireplace. It was larger than Mother's. Long gray teeth closed around the chimney bricks and pulled. Part of the wall collapsed. Moonlight poured into the cabin. I saw another creature outside. Then a third. They moved on 4 limbs, wings folded across their backs. Their bodies were similar to Mother's, but not identical. One had antlers shaped like dead branches. Another had a mane of coarse white hair around its throat. Their eyes fixed on me. They did not look hungry. They looked fascinated. Mother struck the nearest one before it entered. They crashed through the remaining wall. The cabin filled with wings, claws, and screaming. I fell through the opening beneath the floor and landed hard in the tunnel. Above me, the fighting continued. I heard Mother's voice among the others. I could always recognize it. Hers rose higher at the end, breaking into a ragged cough. I crawled. The tunnel seemed smaller than it had during practice. Soil filled my mouth. Roots caught my shirt. Behind me, something tore through the floor. A head forced its way into the opening. The creature's muzzle stretched into the tunnel. Its teeth snapped a few inches from my feet. Mother struck it from behind. The tunnel shook. I crawled until I reached the roots of the fallen tree and pulled myself into the open air. The woods were full of them. Shapes flew between the trees. Others moved through the brush on hooves and claws. Their screams came from every direction. I did what Mother had taught me. I ran toward water. There was a shallow river less than a mile from the cabin. I crossed it, followed the bank, then crossed again. The cries followed. So did the wing beats. I kept moving until I saw lights through the trees. Vehicles. Human voices. A road. I stumbled from the woods barefoot, bleeding and covered in mud. A truck nearly hit me. The driver carried me into the cab and locked the doors. He spoke into a radio while something screamed beyond the tree line. I watched the forest through the rear window. Mother stood between the pines. She was limping. One wing hung lower than the other. Blood covered her chest. She took one step toward the road. Flashing lights appeared in the distance. Mother stopped. For a few seconds, we looked at each other. Then more shapes moved behind her. She turned and disappeared into the woods. That was the last time I saw her for 23 years. The authorities identified me within 2 days. My name was Jonah Leeds. I had been reported missing when I was 2 years old. According to the official record, my mother had driven into the Pine Barrens during a storm. Her car was later found abandoned near a fire road. The driver's door had been left open. There was blood on the seat. There were hoof prints around the vehicle. My mother's body had never been recovered. The police assumed an animal had dragged her away. No one could explain how I had survived. I spent several weeks in a hospital, then entered foster care. For the first year, I slept beneath my bed. I could not tolerate rooms without windows. I refused to eat unless the food had been placed on the floor. Whenever an aircraft passed overhead, I hid in closets. Doctors asked about the creature. They used words like delusion, trauma response, and constructed parent figure. I drew pictures for them. A long face, wings, hooves, claws. Every doctor saw the same thing: the Jersey Devil. By the time I understood the legend, I had already stopped speaking about Mother. The stories made her sound cruel. A cursed 13th child born to a woman named Leeds, a creature that attacked livestock, frightened travelers, and haunted the Pine Barrens for centuries. Sometimes it had a horse's head, sometimes a goat's, sometimes a kangaroo's body, bat wings, or a forked tail. None of the drawings looked exactly like her. Some came close. When I was 16, I found an illustration in an old newspaper archive. The creature had a narrow head, small horns, black wings, and long front claws. I stared at it for almost an hour. The report was dated 1909. The creature in the drawing had the same scar Mother carried across the left side of her muzzle. I told myself it was a coincidence. I had been taught by then that coincidences were preferable to monsters. I grew up. I finished school. I found work repairing roofs, then later inspecting buildings. Heights never bothered me. I could climb places other workers avoided. I moved north. I stopped reading about the Pine Barrens. For a long time, I almost convinced myself that Mother had been an ordinary animal distorted by a child's memory. Then an envelope arrived in my apartment. There was no return address. Inside was a photograph of the cabin I last lived with her. The roof had collapsed. Trees grew through the foundation. The chimney lay in pieces. On the back, someone had written 7 words. "She kept you from your own blood." The envelope also contained a page copied from an old family Bible. Names filled the margins. Leeds. Dozens of them, spread across nearly 300 years. Some had crosses beside them. Others had small drawings shaped like wings. My name appeared at the bottom: Jonah Leeds. Beside it was a date: my 13th birthday. Beneath that, written in darker ink, were the words, "Not delivered." I spent months tracing the document. The handwriting belonged to several people. Some entries dated back to the 18th century. Records disappeared, resurfaced under different names, then returned to the Leeds family. Births were listed. Deaths were not. The children marked with wings simply vanished from public records. They had not all been 13th children. The curse had never been that simple. The most useful information came from a journal held in a historical collection in Atlantic County. It belonged to a physician who had treated members of the family during the late 19th century. He described children born with unusual joints, elongated faces, patches of thick hair, and growths beneath the shoulder blades. Most died young. The survivors changed as they aged. Their families carried them into the pines and did not return with them. The physician believed the Leeds family had preserved a hereditary deformity through generations of isolation. But the final pages of his journal were different. The writing became hurried. He described visiting a house where something moved inside the walls. He heard wings above the ceiling. A woman warned him that the malformed children were not being abandoned. They were being gathered. The last complete sentence read, "There is no single devil in Jersey, but a lineage." I returned to the Pine Barrens the following week. I told myself I wanted answers. The truth was simpler. I wanted to know whether Mother was still alive. The forest looked smaller than I remembered. Roads divided places that had once seemed endless. New houses stood near trails where Mother had taught me to hide. Dirt bikes moved through areas that had once been silent. But deeper in, the old world remained. The trees tightened around the road. The ground darkened. Every familiar smell returned at once. Cedar water, wet moss, pine sap, the faint metallic scent that came before rain. I left my vehicle near an abandoned cranberry bog and continued on foot. I remembered the way. Not consciously. My body chose turns before I recognized them. I crossed the same stream twice. I stepped over roots without looking down. By sunset, I found the fallen tree that had concealed the tunnel. The roots had rotted away. The entrance had collapsed. I followed the slope uphill and reached the cabin after dark. The photograph had been recent. The structure was almost gone. Only 2 walls remained. The roof had fallen inward, covering the floor in beams and shingles. Small plants grew from the fireplace. Someone had disturbed the wreckage. Broken boards had been moved aside, revealing the entrance to the space beneath the floor. I climbed down. The tunnel was gone, but part of the underground chamber remained. There were objects inside. My dictionary, the blankets for my bed, a dead radio. Mother had kept them. At the back of the chamber, beneath a layer of leaves, I found a metal box. Inside was a wallet, a set of car keys, and several folded pages sealed in plastic. The driver's license in the wallet belonged to my biological mother. Her photograph looked strangely familiar. Not because I remembered her, because she had Mother's eyes. The pages were written by hand. The first was addressed to me. My mother knew what lived in the Barrens. She had known before I was born. The Leeds family was divided into 2 groups. Those who remained in towns, maintained records, and protected the family name, and those who lived in the woods. Every few generations, a child was born who appeared entirely human but carried the old traits more strongly than the others. The family called such children heirs. When an heir reached 13, they were taken to the deepest part of the Barrens. My mother did not know exactly what happened there. She only knew that none returned unchanged. When I was 2, she learned I had been marked for delivery. She fled. Family members followed her into the woods and forced her car from the road. Wounded and unable to escape, she carried me toward the only creature she believed might protect me, her older sister. A girl named Rebecca Leeds had vanished at the age of 14. My mother knew Rebecca had not died. She had seen her in the trees. Mother was not the animal that killed my biological mother. Mother was my aunt. The pages ended abruptly. There was blood beneath the plastic. A sound came from above me. One strike against the remaining wall. I could not breathe. A second strike followed. I climbed from the chamber. Mother stood in the clearing. She was smaller than I remembered. Age had thinned her body. The hair around her neck had turned white. One horn was broken near the base. The wing injured during my escape had healed crookedly and dragged across the leaves. But the scar remained across her muzzle. So did the black eyes. She stared at me. I stepped toward her. Mother lowered her head. For 23 years, I had imagined what I might say. I had rehearsed questions, accusations, gratitude. None of it mattered. I placed my forehead against hers. The clicking sound in her throat was weak, but I recognized it. She remembered me. We remained beside the ruins until the moon rose. Mother examined my face and hands. She smelled my hair. Her claws moved carefully over my shoulders, pressing against the bones beneath my skin. When she touched my back, she pulled away. Her head rose sharply. Something screamed in the distance. Another cry answered. Then another. Mother seized my coat in her teeth and pulled me toward the ruined cabin. I understood. 3 strikes. Hide. I refused. Not again. Shapes emerged between the trees. There were more than I had seen as a child. Some moved upright, others dragged themselves forward on oversized wings. Their bodies varied, but each carried some reflection of Mother. A narrow muzzle, black eyes, backward bending legs. The largest stepped into the clearing. Its antlers spread wider than the cabin doorway. Old ropes, metal tags, and pieces of cloth hung from them. Its wings were scarred and nearly hairless. It looked at Mother. Then it looked at me. The creatures lowered their heads. Not to Mother. To me. A pressure built beneath my shoulder blades. I had felt it before. During fevers. During storms. Whenever I returned to photographs of the Pine Barrens, I had mistaken it for muscle pain. Now it moved. Something hard shifted beneath my skin. Mother screamed and threw herself between me and the others. The creatures rushed her. She fought as she had on the night of my 13th birthday. Claws tore through wings. Teeth closed around her neck. Bodies crashed through the cabin ruins. I grabbed a broken length of timber and struck anything that came close. None attacked me. They moved around me. Even when I hit them, they only pushed me aside. The antlered creature watched, waiting. Mother drove one of them into a tree. Another landed on her back. Its jaws closed around the damaged base of her wing. There was a wet crack. Mother collapsed. I reached her as the creatures withdrew. She lay among the broken boards, breathing in short, uneven bursts. I pressed my hands against the wound, though there was too much blood. Her eyes found mine. One claw lifted and touched my shoulder, then the ground. 3 times. Run. I shook my head. Mother struck the earth again. There was no strength behind it. The creatures gathered around the clearing. They were not afraid of her anymore. Mother had hidden me from them for 13 years. She had attacked hunters, search parties, and members of her own bloodline. She had carried me between cabins, covered my scent, burned my hair, buried my blood. She had given up the only world she knew so I could remain human. Or at least appear human. Her claw settled over my hand. She made the clicking sound one last time. Then she stopped breathing. The pain beneath my shoulders became unbearable. I fell forward beside her. My coat split down the back. The creatures began screaming. Not the aggressive cries I remembered. This sound was rhythmic, almost ceremonial. The antlered one approached and pressed its forehead to the ground. The others followed. That was when I understood why they had searched for me, why they had not killed me, why the family Bible called me an heir. They did not believe I belonged to them as a prisoner. They believed they belonged to me. I remained beside Mother until dawn. The creatures disappeared before the sun reached the clearing, but I could still hear them moving through the trees, waiting. The pressure in my back eased after sunrise. The wounds closed quickly. Too quickly. I buried Mother beneath the cabin. I placed the dictionary beside her. Then I returned to my apartment and tried to resume my life. That was 3 months ago. The changes have continued. My eyes no longer adjust normally to daylight. My knees ache unless I bend them slightly backward. Hard growths have appeared along my spine. At night, I hear voices from miles away, heartbeats in neighboring apartments, mice moving inside the walls. Last week, I woke on the roof of my building. I do not remember climbing there. Yesterday, another envelope arrived. Inside was a map of the Pine Barrens. Several areas were marked for development. One mark covered the remains of our cabin. The construction crews are scheduled to begin clearing trees tomorrow morning. I return tonight. I am sitting beside the place where I buried Mother. The forest is no longer silent. Shapes are moving among the pines. Dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. They have come closer than before. Some wait beside the ruined walls. Others circle overhead. They are watching the road. Headlights appeared between the trees 20 minutes ago. The first construction vehicles have arrived early. Men are unloading equipment. I can hear them discussing the cabin. One of them believes squatters have been living here. Another has been ordered to remove anything left behind. They don't know what is beneath the floor. They don't know what is in the trees. The growths under my shoulders have opened. The pain is gone now. My wings are larger than Mother's were. They strike the ground when I stand. The antlered creature has lowered its head. The others are waiting for me to move. For most of my life, I believed Mother taught me how to hide from monsters. I was wrong. She taught me how to survive them. 3 slow beats shake dust from the cabin walls. Every creature in the forest turns toward me. And this time, I am the one who screams. If you'd like to hear more from the Hollows, consider subscribing to Hushed Hollows. There are more names hidden in old family records. There are more cabins rotting beneath the pines. And there are more creatures in the woods that may remember you better than you remember them. Tell me in the comments which cryptid you want us to investigate next. Until then, keep your windows shut. And if something lands on your roof 3 times, do not let it know you heard.